In this episode, Preston McClellan, co-founder and CEO of Golf Space Collective, shares his journey from a young golfer inspired by Tiger Woods to a social media pioneer in the sports industry. He discusses the evolution of social media in sports, the founding of GSC, and the importance of community and relationships in golf. Preston emphasizes how the need for golfers to embrace social media for personal branding led to the unique approach to his agency, which focuses on marketing for golfers by golfers. In this conversation, we discuss the growth of his golf-focused agency, the importance of building relationships, and the transition from a corporate environment to entrepreneurship. Let's jump into the episode. Welcome to The Range, the podcast where we explore the intersection of passion and business in the world of golf. I'm your host, Ari Ratner, and each episode will dive into the stories of the innovators, entrepreneurs, and trailblazers who are transforming the game we love into thriving businesses. Whether you're a golf enthusiast, an inspiring entrepreneur, or just curious about the business behind the sport, you're in the right place. So grab your clubs and join us on The Range as we tee off into the world of golf entrepreneurship. All right, welcome back to another episode of The Range. Extremely excited to have on Preston McClellan, a co-founder and CEO of Golf Space Collective. Preston, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you having me on.
So figure we get started and give the audience a sense of your connection to the game of golf.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll kind of go through the whole origin story and feel free to interrupt me if I ramble too much. But
Sure.
Yeah, when I started playing golf, I guess a classic Tiger Woods inspiration. I was born in 1990. I remember my dad kind of making me watch the 1997 Masters when Tiger was having that historic run there, and just thought, wow, it looks fun. It's cool. He made the sport look exciting. And pretty quickly after that, found some clubs. I'm left-handed, so finding left-handed clubs back in the 90s was like super easy. We serendipitously found some at a garage sale. I played and was hooked. Started playing golf, pretty much competitively at age 8. I was pretty decent, nothing crazy. Could have played Division 2 or 3 in school, but I knew the Memphis golf coach really well at the University of Memphis, and I ended up going to school there. I started there in 2008. So I did sports information, and my dad had worked in sports information my whole life, and so I was familiar with media guides, stats, public relations, that type of thing, and that's what I was majoring in college with PR. So I worked for the golf team initially. Happened to be right when social media was kind of getting started. And my sophomore year in college, I took a class they were offering called social media. And Instagram happened to launch that year, and I joined the platform. So I always say that the easiest way to say how long I've been working in social is my Instagram username, which is Preston. Mm-hmm. I guess be the first Preston in the world that joined Instagram 15 years ago. And I've kind of grown up with social media ever since. So started doing a little bit of social in college. And, we started the Twitter accounts and the Instagram accounts for Memphis Tigers back in the day, and experimented with a lot of things. Didn't really necessarily know if social media was going to be a career at the time when I was graduating college in 2012. And it started to become a little more legit. But I knew I wanted to work in sports. So that's when I went to Ohio University for graduate school. And that program there is really kind of what helped me put all the pieces together of what I wanted to do. And Ohio's a great program. I can't say enough good things about it. But I got my MBA there as well as a master's in sports administration. Really, 2012 to 2014, I think, is really when social media kind of took a massive leap forward. It's when Facebook acquired Instagram for $1 billion in 2012. Yep. It kind of signaled, I think, that, okay, this is legitimate. We don't know exactly what that means, but social media is going to be a marketing. And so I kind of decided I would go and I'm making that my career track while I was at Ohio. And that ended up being really beneficial to me because very few people were doing that at the time. And I was kind of branding myself personally. It's like, I'm the social media, the digital media guy. I'm just kind of growing up with it from there. So graduated from OU, took a job at an agency in Chicago called Navigate, and with a guy named AJ Masters, super dynamic entrepreneur. So I learned a lot from him about the business side of things there. Worked there for a year and had one Chicago winter and decided that I couldn't handle the North anymore and started looking for jobs. And luckily there was a job available on a job board for the PGA Tour. They were looking for a manager of what they called at the time new media and digital communications, because they didn't know exactly what it was. My first role was to come in and kind of sit in between the small existing content team and the athletes, and both create a better relationship with the athletes to do more content with the tour, and also start to work with the players on building their own social media presence, and kind of keep trying to get them to understand the value back in 2015 of, hey, let's invest in Instagram and it'll pay off later. And so kind of started the tour in 2015, was there during a rapid growth phase, of all things digital media. I was there for about 7 years and Ended up leaving at the end of 2021. Loved the tour. Can't say enough good things about my time there. And just wanted to do my own thing and started consulting at the end of 2021 in golf. And 6 months later, had the opportunity to start what's now Golf Space Collective with my co-founders, Brian Ford and Michael Griffo, two guys who I worked with in the industry. And we formed Golf Space. So the agency, the whole idea is that, golf is a unique sport in a lot of ways, both in terms of pedigree and understanding the nuances of playing the sport and the storylines of the professional side of the game. And so a lot of times when you're working with agencies in the golf world, you may not be working with golfers. You might be working with someone who's great at design or great at website, coding or whatever, but there's a little bit that's lost in translation when that person's not a golfer themselves. Mm-hmm. So that premise of Golf Space is that we do golf marketing for golfers by golfers. And so that everyone that's on our staff or on our team is going to be someone who is very good at what they do in that niche, but they're also a golfer. And so they understand, if we're doing a product design for a company, they understand use multiple types of grips. They understand difference between ported grips and non-ported grips and just little nuances and things like that. So that's really where we found success, is fitting in the industry and kind of being that seamless transition. So I guess that's my full, I'm a golfer. It's still my favorite sport. Still somewhat decent. I don't play nearly as much as I used to, obviously, but I enjoy being able to make a living in the game that kind of I grew up with and just the evolution in between.
I think it's awesome that you're able to work in an industry that you're passionate about. But before we talk a lot about Golf Space, interesting part of the story, you were an entrepreneur while attending Memphis, right? Like you started social accounts for the university, for the teams. Talk a little bit about how that happened, because it was so new back then, right? Yeah. It was a bit of a wild west. It still kind of is, but certainly back then. Talk about how you talked those teams into allowing you to do that, and the process or steps you took to build a following, for the university.
Yeah. It kind of all started with actually being able to message with recruits a little bit easier. So back, in the off 10s or whatever you want to, the late 2000s, Skype was just, WhatsApp was still very new. Messaging people outside of your country was still not necessarily the easiest thing in the world to do. And Facebook, when they launched, Messenger and the ability to chat with people, the whole premise initially was the golf team recruited a lot of thought it would be easy if we started a Facebook page for the men's golf team just so we could message international recruits. And that was the original idea. And the coach was like, yeah, that sounds like a no-brainer. Let's do that. And so created a profile. We could, actual profile page then, the brand pages. And that had a little bit of success and so that kind of opened up the one coach being like, oh, the social media thing could have a positive impact. And then his name was Grant Robin at the time. And I think he's the coach at Kansas State now for golf. And him believing in it for just, telling other coaches about it kind of created a little bit of word of mouth effect within the athletic department. And I worked in the sports information team, and we needed we wanted to have a way to connect with more fans. And we noticed that Twitter in particular was growing quite a bit at the time. So we started accounts to where we would just start live tweeting the games, that we were working. Really, this is not when Twitter was just 140 characters and there was no images whatsoever on the platform. And we would live tweet. So it was really 2 or 3 years of experimentation to grow the fan base and to reach the younger audience and to have some experimentation. And so the Memphis process was pretty easy because we were an athletic department and it wasn't necessarily a lot, but it was always selling ideas, kind of coming back to what you said. In terms of entrepreneurial, I realized early on, I was good at coming up something that I saw as an idea, figuring out how to apply that to whatever the world I was working in at the time, and then pitching that to the people who were in charge to where they could understand the connection between the idea and some potential result from the idea. And so I think that's where I realized that okay, no matter what I'm going to be doing, if I'm working a job or if I'm running my own company, I'm always going to be selling something, whether it's ideas or products or whatever the case may be. And so that's what happened at the tour as well. I think that the tour is selling athletes on the idea of hey, this is going to be a part of your brand, or selling, sponsors on the idea that they should invest more in the digital side of content. And so really just understand, once I realized that, that's really what gave me the confidence to eventually start Golf Space, because I realized I had been selling my entire career, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Yeah. Speaking of that, and I think you're spot on, when you were with the PGA and working directly with the players, and talking to them about getting on social, the impact it can have to their personal brand. Back then, I'm sure now it's a lot easier of a conversation because all athletes see the power of social. Back then, it was a bit of an unknown. So talk a little bit about the experience of pitching athletes and doing, allowing themselves to be more vulnerable, peeling back the curtain a bit and allowing fans to see more of their life than what they would see on TV.
Yeah. It definitely, you got the responses initially like run the gamut of people being like open to the idea or like, absolutely not. The funniest one always to me is like, I have a vivid memory of talking to Phil Mickelson in 2015 at the, in Orlando at the API right after I started, and kind of introducing myself and explaining to him like what the tour had hired me to do, and him just very politely, but very strongly saying like, thanks, but no thanks.
Yeah.
And now what he's turned into on social is pretty funny after the fact. But initially it was, what I learned quickly was you can't come up to an athlete and just say that you should do this just because it's cool or I think it's a good idea. You got to give them more of a quantitative reason to do it. And what I ended up realizing is as long as you can put it in the context of business for them, then it tends to resonate. And so that's how I ended up really connecting with them and saying, hey, this is not like necessarily something that you may want to do, but it's something you should do because you're going to leave money on the table if you don't. And kind of showing them how, marketing dollars were starting to flow from traditional means into social, and how if they built an audience, they could then monetize that audience at a fairly significant rate. And that would add money to their bottom line. And also, back before social, the main way that players would get sponsorship dollars, obviously had the logos on their shirts and things, but they would do appearances, right? So that's days of their lives throughout the year that they have to commit to going somewhere and physically being somewhere. So when I could tell them like, hey, if you build an audience, you can have some of those dollars come to you for hosting it and not actually have to physically give up your days to get those dollars from the sponsors. That was kind of a turning point. They're like, I get it now. Like if I invest in the content now, then I can spend 10 less days on the road next year doing these sponsor appearances because I have an audience that's just as valuable to that sponsor.
Yeah, no, it's super interesting. So let's fast forward a little bit to Golf Space. As we discussed this podcast, the whole genesis is to try to give other entrepreneurs a sense of how successful entrepreneurs built their business. So what I like to do is try to ask questions from the idea on a napkin to actually fulfilling that idea and building a business. If you don't mind, talk a little bit about those early conversations with your co-founders, why Golf Space Collective, why, and also give the audience a sense of those three areas that you're focused on and how you landed there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, the idea for like initially like me doing anything on my own kind of came when I was at the tour, and part of my job in 2019 and 2020 was working with the tours agencies, several different companies they work with to do, everything from commercial content and animation and all these other specialty areas. And always kind of having the sense of like, all right, people we're working with are very talented, but there's something missing here because they just don't work in golf and they're not fully embedded into the game. And so that's when I, realized like if I can assemble the right group of creative people and offer similar services, but with people who understood the game, I think there would be value there. And so Micah and Brian, my two co-founders, were they actually had started their own just 2-person company working within golf. They were we got connected originally through Joel Damon's agent, Derek Bowen, and they had done some projects for Joel. And in the early days when Joel was just kind of getting on tour and getting popular, and I had to hire Micah and Brian a couple of times when I was at the tour to do projects. So when I left the tour, we were still very much in touch, and they were still doing business inside marketing within golf. And they have complementary skill sets to me, whereas I'm more on the social and business side. Brian is more on the app design, coding, creative development, and Micah is more on the traditional marketing, email marketing, selling of packages and services. And so we kept hiring each other for projects. And finally, about 3 months in, we started talking like, what if we just combine things, right? It was almost like kind of like one of those funny conversations of like, well, we probably should have talked about this a while ago. Why did, once we started lining up like, what their revenue numbers looked like at the time and what my clients looked like at the time, it was like, it just made a lot of sense to go in. We have very, very equal sides of things. So we just having good relationships, we just decided to start this, business partners as a third, and kind of try to evolve it from there. And what we realized quickly is that, there's way more power in a group than there is in one. So we could work together on projects, and allowed me to free myself up from some of the more creative stuff that Brian's better at, and actually go out and do more business development and get more clients and eventually hire more people and kind of scale it from there. And so we ended up the name Golf Space was actually kind of literally like as a holding, like we had it as like a placeholder, like we're going to call it something in the golf space, right? And we had a whole bunch of, we actually paid a company to help us, come up with like multiple ideations and stuff like that. And we hated all of them. And finally we're like, we just started noticing people say the word golf space like fairly organically, right? When they're just talking about like, oh, we're looking to do X, Y, and Z in the golf space. And we thought, okay, let's just call it that. And then the collective really comes from it's a unique part of our business model is that we're not a traditional agency. We're not going to have multiple videographers and designers on full-time staff. We have a collective of people. There's about 75 different people in the industry that we work with. And we scale up and down based on clients and their needs and their projects, right? And so that allows us to be a lot more efficient, a lot more cost efficient for clients, and really not have necessarily a rate part that we're held to, and not have to pass along salary costs and building costs and things of that nature. So our pricing is typically a lot more competitive than traditional agency pricing, but the quality is just the same. And so to answer the last part of your question, that we kind of operate in three main areas. The most visible one is the tournament side of things. So we do work with a lot of professional golf events to do all of their content services year round and during tournament week. So events like the Chevron Championship on the LPGA Tour, or the Simmons Bank Championship on PGA Tour Champions, or AT&T Pro-Am on PGA Tour. And we do all of their social media presence, all of their photography and videography during tournament week, and working with them to deliver on sponsor commitments, kind of all soup to nuts when it comes to marketing. We work. The second main area is within, products and businesses within the game. So we work with Superstroke is the biggest one in that vertical. I'm doing everything from product design to product rollout strategy and everything in between there. And the third main one is within the amateur side of the game. So with state golf associations. So anyone in the U.S. or in Canada that has a handicap, a jet number will have that through some sort of a local or state golf association. And we work in a variety of different ways in that, with the main client being Texas Golf Association, and kind of helping them grow their membership, retain people, create more value for golfers, and better market the game within the state. So we're, continue looking to grow. We bought a company in 2023, a production company with Chris Brandt, who's also former PGA Tour employee. And so we've been rolling out more and more production services, working more with sponsors and corporate entities within the game. So that's where I see a lot of our growth potential next year, is kind of getting more into the broader and larger scale production of things.
I've noticed a theme throughout the conversations I've had, and also as limited as it is my interaction in the golf community, that term community, and it's quite important. Talk a little bit about your experience at the tour, you and the other founders, Micah and Brian, and their association within the golf community, and how important it is to lean on that community as you're growing a business, and in your case, the agency.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, golf is a very small world, especially on the business side. It's still a niche. It's still a niche community of people that work with it. And I think I was lucky enough to get started to work in golf, far back as 2012, and really kind of get in when the sport was in a down period at the time from, marketability standpoint, and really have been able to ride the upswing through the last few years and the popularity of it. And golf widely benefited extremely from COVID. And there's, it was one of the main things sports people were allowed to do very early on. And I think a lot of people got exposed to that, golf is, actually fun.
Yeah.
It's also one of those things that doesn't make sense until you go do it, right? If anyone's ever seen the movie 10 Cup, it's like, the scene where Evan Costner's teaching, forget the actress's name, how to hit it, and she hits the one shot. And it's like, yes, ma'am, that's what brings you back. Once you play golf once and hit a good shot, you get it, right?
Yeah. For those of us who are bad golfers, when you hit one good shot around, you come back the next time.
That's why it's like almost comical how often you could have a terrible round, but you'll hit one good shot on, the 17th or 18th hole, and it's like, all right, I'll come next time.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think, golf it's been on the upswing. And so in terms of entrepreneurism within it, I just tried to make sure that we're adapting with where the game's going. And I think that we still have a lot of questions. I'm very curious to see how this match goes. As we're recording this, Bryson, the LIV PGA Tour match is going to happen this week. I think that's going to be a very interesting storyline to see how that develops within the game. But I think for the most part, it's just that the community itself is small, but it's also very charitable. I'm drawing a blank on the right word, but people want to help people within the game of golf. So if you invest into relationships, they'll ultimately come back to you. And I think that's a lesson that across entrepreneurship in any industry is that at the end of the day, it's relationships that are going to matter, right? Like, in sports, nothing that we're doing is actually like that difficult, right? We're not doctors, we're not lawyers, we're not like rocket scientists. And so a lot of people can do our jobs. A lot of people could do what my company offers. And what I like to think we try to pride ourselves on is being easy to work with, being positive, being a positive company that when you talk to us, we want you to leave the call feeling good, feeling like you have had less on your plate and that we're there to, be of assistance. I think that is the type of stuff that reciprocity will come to you as long as you invest it in the right way on the front end.
Yeah, no, I've certainly experienced that even with these conversations. Yeah, I think you and I first connected on Twitter probably a year and a half, 2 years ago. And because of just following along with it, you're gracious enough to offer your time to have this conversation, which I appreciate. Going back to the beginning of the formation of Golf Space Collective. So, you guys had this idea, bring together kind of the forces of the three of you. You're in the space, you have the network. How did you tell existing clients that you were forming this agency? How did you drive new business as you're expanding your offerings? And how did you grow the agency from kind of start to year one, if you will?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of comes back to the last question on relationships too. I had, my time at the tour, I had traveled a lot, gone to a lot of events, had the privilege to meet all the different people. And, luckily or thankfully, when I was working there, I kind of was able to build a personal brand around being, the golf digital social guy. And I just met a lot of people, helped solve a lot of problems for people, get them started. And so, giving them positive experience of working with me when I was at the tour. And so they knew that all right, Preston does social media and digital media. He's very reliable. He's very easy to work with. And that was kind of something I always wanted to make sure people knew about me. And so when I started thinking about leaving the tour, obviously I went to some of my closer, friends and people I had relationships and told them I was thinking about doing this, and people I thought that maybe I could work with after the fact, and saying hey, if I were to leave and offer, these types of services, do you think that there's a demand there? And having enough conversations with people saying yeah, I think you could do that. And so I had started having that thought during COVID and mid 2020, and I didn't leave the tour until the end of 2021. So, I was very diligent. I built myself a finance, I started saving money and making sure. So the biggest advice I get to people that want to start a company is save money. Like if you're already in a job, save money up, give yourself, a few months of a runway to where if you don't make a single dollar, you have time to figure it out. Because at the end of the day, you have to bet on yourself, but you need to give yourself time for that to pay off. And then if you leave with no money, you're putting so much pressure on yourself and the timing is not right. So I built that runway. And then when I actually left the tour, officially, I was able to talk about that publicly. I literally took literally everyone in my email database that I had sent. I sent one mass email. I sent dozens of personal emails to people that I knew really well, but I sent one mass email saying, thank you so much for everything over the last 7 years. I'm leaving to do this. If I have not talked to you individually, would love to. And that, honestly, the amount of inbound responses I got from that was enough to get going. And I spent the next 2 months, having phone calls with people and letting them know what I was doing, and, them saying, oh, well, maybe we could do this, and finding ways to add value and doing projects. And then once I had Micah and Brian on board to do actual Golf Space, and we kind of had an idea of a company, we were able to go back to those same people that we were all working with individually and saying, hey, we're now formed a company. This changed nothing for our relationship, but here's what we can also do now on top of what we were doing, and kind of built it from there. And then on an ongoing basis, one of the things we've done really well and I'm proud of is just doing a good job of being out there publicly for ourselves as founders, and not having to necessarily do a lot of cold calling or traditional business development, but rather talking about success stories we've had, talking about the strategies we've done with clients. We do, a bi-weekly newsletter to all of our contacts. It's about 1,500 people. I post regularly on my LinkedIn. I share things on Instagram. The Golf Space, brand has an Instagram page. We're constantly talking about the work that we do and the things that have gone well, and creating so that we have inbound people to see, to see that content, right? And they're like, oh yeah, I forget. Yeah, Preston's out there doing that. We should reconnect with them. And I've had so many inbound conversations on. Granted, to grow the company to the next level, we're probably going to have to start doing more of traditional sales process and outbound. But for the last 3 years, it's been a kind of relying on those relationships and, word of mouth and growing from there.
To that point, talking about the growth of the agency, do you anticipate extending outside of golf, or do you think there's enough business within golf that you
this
can?
company specifically, I definitely want to be golf specific.
Yeah.
Like, it's kind of like to stick to the true mission of the company. I'm only 34. Who knows what the rest of my personal career, and like, I could definitely see myself eventually doing another company, another sport or something broader. But for golf, for this company and near term and probably somewhat long term, I see it being golf focused. And I think that the golf industry is maturing a lot from a marketing standpoint. It's kind of catching up with the growth of the last 3 to 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think that a lot of the bigger entities within golf, some of the bigger agencies are starting to formalize their marketing operations and understand that, seeing like companies like ours that have been successful in these spaces, I think there'll be some consolidation there.
Mm-hmm.
I think that, golf space in general, like, we pride ourselves on being a golf focused company. And I think that for now, and I think the golf growth is going to continue for another few years at least.
Yeah.
And that'll be something we just kind of monitor to see what happens from there.
I think it's interesting because traditional golf is still growing, but so many non-traditional aspects of the sport are being built and created. So, that I think allows an agency like yours to continue to grow as the
right. Yeah, there's a lot. I'll be very, we've done a little bit of work with the TGL. I'm excited to see how that works out in 2025. We've got the first match of that is a few weeks from now.
Yep.
And I think, like, the growth of people playing the game is significant. There's obviously the professional side is having their struggles somewhat with viewership and whatnot. But to your point, like, it's growing in various ways, and we're kind of positioned to be able to do all of that, which is exciting for sure.
It's super exciting. One thing a theme that I'm hearing throughout this conversation, and you talked a little bit about, is that those relationships that you've created and that you've fostered. When you decided to leave the PGA, I'm sure there was an uncomfortable conversation with your boss at the PGA and talking about what the plan was after you leave. Explain a little bit how that went and the positives you were able to take from it, given the relationships you've built, over the 7 years with the tour.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a few different people I reported to there, but the main woman that I worked with over this time is Laura Neal, and she's still there. She's one of, I don't know her exact title, but she's essentially head of communications and marketing. And she was, a mentor to me, a friend, and always very good to me. And, I was a difficult conversation, but like within 2 minutes of me being in her office telling her, she basically was like, I'm surprised it took you this long to do this. Like, I think everyone kind of, like, if you get to know me at all, I kind of have, like I said, it's obvious that I don't work well within a large corporate environment, not necessarily because I'm, difficult to work with or whatever, but I just like to do my own thing, and I kind of operate to the beat of my own drum. And so I think it was something that I always knew that I would do. I always, was not shy to tell people, like, I never wanted to be, an executive at the PGA Tour. I never wanted to work there for 25 years. That's not who I am. I wanted to go out and experience different parts of work environments and things. So I think what made it easy is that I feel like I did everything I possibly could have when I was there. And I think that I'm very proud of, built a team that's still there. The player content team at the PGA Tour is now led by Mohammed Nelson Silveria, is my boss who heads it and has done a great job. There's 5 people still working there and create content for all the players that hired directly. And, it wasn't just me, obviously, like, they're taking that whole team to another level that I never could have imagined. But I think I laid a really good groundwork, and I was very upfront with the tour, and we worked on a deal. I had a transition out to where it wasn't like, hey, here's 2 weeks, I'm leaving. It's like, I'm going to leave. I can do it in 2 weeks if you guys don't want me here, but I'm also more than willing to work with you, making sure that it isn't difficult, as I transition out. I think that made the conversation a lot easier too.
For sure. And I think the fact that they didn't ask you to leave in 2 weeks talks to the relationships that you built, and that's probably why they wanted a longer transition plan. As we segue to kind of the last portion of the conversation, would love to, you talked a little bit about saving money is a piece of advice for other entrepreneurs. What are some other pieces of advice that you could give entrepreneurs generally, and then entrepreneurs specifically in the golf space?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I mean, entrepreneurs generally, it's like, I think the reason why there are so few is it is a risk, and you just have to do it, right? And I think I've had, several, if not dozens of conversations with people and friends or, acquaintances of since I have started this company of asking like, how did you do it? And it's like, there's never going to be like a blueprint how to do it. Right. And so I think part of it is coming up with an idea, building a business plan and making sure you have a way to monetize that idea definitively before you do anything. But at the end, like other than that, you have to quit at some point the regular job and do it full time. Right. And so I think a lot of people are just terrified. They start maybe trying to do some projects on the side and then they get super overwhelmed trying to do that and the regular job. And then they just never go any further than that. And so I think at the end of the day, the risk is there and you have to be willing to take it and be confident enough in yourself that you're going to figure it out. And so what I ended up doing was breaking down, okay, this is how much I'm making in my W-2 salary after taxes, talking to an accountant to understand if I start an LLC and make the same, like, what do I need as an entrepreneur in a different tax structure? What do I need to make to walk away with the same amount of dollars? And if you do any if you do any research into American tax structure and everything, owning your own business is extremely advantageous from a tax perspective and how you pay yourself and how many of the dollars you can keep when you're dealing with yourself versus in a W-2 situation. So that was very illuminating for me. Is like, oh, okay, I actually only need to make about 70% of what I make in my W-2 job to walk away with the same amount of dollars per month. And so it's like, okay, I came up with the numbers like, okay, this is how much, $4,000 to $5,000 per month after taxes that I need to make to be able to sustain my lifestyle for a little. I just want to grow beyond that. But that gave me a lot of comfort of being like, okay, here's a definitive target that I need to get to, and then designing a plan to get to the number. And so that made it more attainable to me rather than thinking about like, oh shit, I got to go out and start, I got to make $200,000 next year. It's like, no, I just need to make $4,000 the first month. And it's like, okay, that's more attainable to do that. And then the last one is just, it's always easier to save money when you have a job. So like, I think a lot of people, make some tough financial decisions, like eat out a few times less per month, whatever the case may be. And I did that for about a year and a half. Nothing crazy. I didn't like live poorly or anything, but I made sure I saved up about $20,000 so that I had, a little bit of a runway. So that when I quit the tour, if like for whatever reason, for the first 8 weeks, I didn't land a project or someone was late paying or whatever, that I didn't have a freak out moment, have to go back to searching for a job. So having that little bit of a rainy day fund, obviously really, really important in my opinion.
Yeah, one thing that I'd love to hit on is, a lot of the conversations so far and the future of the podcast will include products, right? Companies that have products to sell. As an agency, you're selling services. So, talk a little bit about, the excitement from your perspective in that, but also the challenge of selling a service over a product.
Yeah, for sure. So, obviously, like the services, we're consistently going on, somewhat playing a game of whack-a-mole with clients, right? Where you're trying to find, project. And so what we try to build is, longer term relationships with retainer services to where we really operate as almost like an internal portion of the team for the company that we're working with, so that they see us as an ongoing part of that, right? And sign 1 to 3 year deals to where we can account for cash flow and make projections and things of that nature. And that's really been the biggest growth factor for us this year, and getting clients who we've done projects for who have had success and saying, okay, we now want to turn that into a longer term deal. And that allows us to grow and plan and everything too. Products, obviously totally different. Like, if you're selling, putter, like I know you talked to Hannah in golf, and that's a whole different operation, right? In terms of like, you're having to do the product, make the product and also do the marketing, right? So like we want to work with companies like that to make their lives easier versus being the product folks ourselves. Like, I've never been an entrepreneur in terms of like coming up with ideas of a widget or a product to sell. It's never been how my brain has worked. My brain's always been the way the person that person talks to about how to make it better, sell it or how to brand it or whatever. And so I think we have found our niche, and that we are the idea guys that take, your product or the service we're doing and help you make more money from it at the end of the day.
Yeah, which I think is very much needed across the board, which is exciting, I'm sure. We touched on the evolution of golf, including TGL, including, just the different ways of playing the sport, whether through Top Golf or with, how Grass Clippings is introducing night golf and par threes. How do you envision golf space evolving with the sport as it evolves?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. The main thing is making sure that we stay in tune with the sport and that we are going to those venues and playing lighted par three courses and experiencing that and understanding why it's popular, and then being able to showcase that to people who are bringing people to those venues. And so I think that we are, uniquely positioned that we're kind of, our employees were between the ages of 24 and 37. So we're kind of in this, the people that everyone's trying to reach, we're basically those consumers essentially.
Yeah.
And so we can kind of use ourselves as testing grounds and whatnot. And so I think that we understand, and all of us are big proponents of growing the game. So we would not be the right people to work with a traditional country club or a brand in golf that is older, that has that more of that traditional value. We're definitely the more modern folks that want the light par three courses. We want to be able to, fit t-shirts to golf courses. I want, the game to be more approachable and friendly. And so I think that when we talk to those companies and they hear about what we're doing and they get a chance to just talk with us and see what the work we've done, they can kind of see that come to life. So I think the game, like the reason people like golf, like we talked about, it's fun once you hit a good shot, but it's also the camaraderie, the experience. If you are playing an outdoor venue, being outside and playing that, putting your feet on the ground type of thing, sunlight. And I think I'm excited because like golf it's not 18 holes in 4.5 hours at a country club. Golf is whatever you want it to be. And I think finally the sport is more embracing that there's so many different entry points into the game. And I think that it's exciting to be able to help across all of that for sure.
I love that. I think it's so true. Kind of last big question before we end with a lightning round of hopefully what you find in the audience finds fun questions. But as an entrepreneur and as a golfer, can you talk a little bit about the similarities between the two?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good, funny thing. Like, so I played competitively for such a long time, and it's the one sport that where it's just on you when you're out there. Like we all as golfers invent, all the excuses in the world of why it's not our fault when things go wrong. But at the end of the day, it really is on you. You do spend, if you play competitively at all, you spend quite a bit of time alone growing up, and it's not necessarily a bad thing at all. But I've gotten very used to being with my thoughts and myself and being kind of, somewhat confident in who I am. And golf was, I'm left-handed. I also play the game in a very, I've had maybe 3 or 4 lessons in my whole life. I kind of just go out there and poke it around in a very different style of golf than most people. And people, when I was playing competitively, they kind of hated it because I just didn't do things normally. And I got used to being just my own person. And I think that gave me a lot of, internal confidence and just knowing that I may not be doing it the way that certain people are, but I am going to do it in my way. I'm going to get it done. I think that golf also, it really does teach you a lot of really good values of, work integrity. Tiger always says you earn it in the dirt. And I've always thought that about golf is you really do get what you put into this sport. And
yeah,
you also get, one of the things I always valued is you get a lot of experience being with adults as a kid when you play golf, just being in conversations that, more real and so you get used to having, talking about what you're going to do with your life or hearing from successful people. And I think that I didn't really realize how much value that I had until I got older, but golf does put you more than other sports around successful people. And I think that there's a lot of value in that.
That's awesome. Appreciate that answer. So before I let you jump, just going to do a handful of quick rapid fire questions to give the audience a different sense of you or a peek behind your curtain and allow people to understand who you are as a person. And then I'll let you go. Sound good? Sound okay?
Sounds great.
Awesome. What's the favorite golf course you've played at?
I got a chance to play Spyglass a month ago. So that would have to be number one. It was always on the bucket list.
How'd you hit them?
Terrible, but it was 25-mile-an-hour wind, but it was great. Anytime I get to chance to play a course that you see on TV a lot, or I've seen pros play, is always really fun.
That's awesome. What's the one piece of gear that you can't live without on the course?
On the course, oh man, so it's funny. Everyone that knows me, I have a chalk bag on my golf bag because I have the sweatiest hands of all time.
Wow.
Literally, I'm a pitcher. Before I swing, I generally go into the chalk bag.
That's awesome. What's the proudest moment as a golf entrepreneur so far?
I think probably just going back and getting to work the same events I did at the tour, but in my own capacity and, reconnecting with my old colleagues, but kind of being proud to that I'm there on my own terms versus being an employee. Something I thought I would be able to do, but now that it's happened, it's very cool.
That's awesome. Go-to snack or drink while playing?
It's a good question. So alcohol,
whatever.
I don't play golf anymore if I'm not enjoying a few adult beverages. So
that's fair.
I do enjoy the classic transfusion when I'm on the golf course. And then snack wise, like if I'm in that situation, it's gotta be a hot dog at the turn for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Love that. Last question. If you could work with any brand, with Golf Space, what would be that brand?
Yeah, I think our everyone's golf dream is to work with Augusta. So we would love to have that at some point, the opportunity to work with the Masters or the course in some capacity for sure.
Absolutely. Well, Preston, I appreciate the time. Hope you've enjoyed the conversation. I certainly have. Before we jump, I give the audience your socials, where they could find you, where they could look up Golf Space.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the time as well. Yeah, our website's just golfspacecollective.com. Same as that username on Instagram as well. And then I do have Instagram at Preston, but I honestly don't post that much on anymore. I'm on Twitter at P_McClellan, I guess X now, I should say.
Yeah.
Post quite a bit more there. And then LinkedIn, everyone can always find me there as well.
Awesome. Well, appreciate the time. Look forward to following along Golf Space journey, and we'll see you out on the course.
Yeah, likewise. Thanks, man.
All right. Take care.